Cancer nowadays is not the death sentence that people used to think it was.
Meet 4 Minnesotans who are living fulfilling lives with cancer. Each diagnosis is unique, as is the treatment, outlook, and response to living with the disease.
I'm kind of a fighter, so I just wasn't really ready just to give in to it. I want to be able to keep going on and being comfortable while we fight this thing.
We want to say hello and welcome to TPT's newest interactive feature, Google Hangout Chatbacks. We hope the online discussions give you, the viewer, a chance to engage with us about our programming. This is the second of 4 chatbacks focusing on the topic of cancer. I'm your host, Mary Lahammer from TPT, and I had the pleasure of hosting the Living Beyond Cancer program last week, where I got to meet and share some amazing and really inspiring stories about Minnesotans battling cancer. That program airs Monday, March 30th at 10 p.m. on TPT2. And today we're going to focus on the topic of living well throughout cancer. Cancer is increasingly a disease. You can still live a long, productive life. And we want to think about how we can enjoy life despite a cancer diagnosis. That's the focus of our conversation. You can send the questions to us at Twitter at TPT or email us tptmn@tpt.org. Living Beyond Cancer, a celebration, the program we told you about earlier. It tells a story of 5 cancer patients fighting the disease, and today we welcome one of those featured, Deanna Thompson. Deanna, can you say hello?
Hello.
Hi, good, we've got you. We also are joined by Maureen Adelman, an 8-time nominee for the Living Beyond Cancer program, here to tell her story. Maureen, welcome.
Thank you. Hi.
Great. And next Tuesday, March 31st, will premiere yet another Late Life series produced with our partner, Allina. The next one is called Late Life Cancer in Between. Don Mikkelson is the filmmaker in that endeavor. Hello, Don.
Hi.
Hi. And finally, we have Dr. Liat Goldman and Sandra Schelinger. They join us. Dr. Goldman is a cancer rehabilitation specialist at Allina, and Sandra is a palliative care professional with senior care transitions. Hello, you two.
Hello.
Hello, great. Well, let's dive into this digital endeavor today and try and have a conversation here. We're going to start with Deanna. In Living Beyond Cancer celebration, you found really a remarkable balance between your job, your family, and living with this chronic condition. Tell us how you got there.
That's a good question. I'm not sure balance is always the reality. I mean, I think cancer radically upsets your life. And I have stage 4 breast cancer. I have a pretty lousy prognosis. The cancer broke my back, and I couldn't really get out of bed by myself, get dressed by myself, couldn't drive anywhere. So it's been a long road. And so far, overall, after the first about 8 months of the diagnosis, I've been living pretty well with the disease. I've had 2 other surgeries, and the treatment continues when you have stage 4 cancer. It doesn't go away. But I would say a key aspect of living well with the disease is the support of other people. So I'm very indebted to and appreciative of my family support and our church support and the incredible network of friends who support us, and neighbors, and my workplace, my husband's workplace, the school communities of our girls. And so I wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today without the support of so many people helping us through this time.
Yeah, I'd like to hear about some of those support systems. You've got some books behind you. Are you at work right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about how you've worked through this.
Yeah, I got diagnosed in December of 2008, and I had to I couldn't finish teaching the end of fall semester that year, and that was really hard. And then I was so sick, and my back was in such bad shape, I couldn't teach my January class, so we had to find someone else to do that. And I actually went back to teach in the spring of 2009 because I thought I would never teach again. I thought I was dying very soon, and so it was important for me to go back into the classroom. And that ended up being harder than I thought. I thought I would go in, and on the first day I would say, well, I've got cancer, and this is what my treatment looks like. And then I got into the classroom and realized I could barely stand up for very long, and I was way too emotionally fragile to talk to my students about it at that point. So it was a that was a hard semester. I did eventually tell my students, and then I went on sabbatical and didn't think I would teach again. And instead of dying, I went into remission. Now I'm in my 3rd remission, but that was the first one. And so I decided after sabbatical to come back teaching and try it full time. And then if I couldn't handle it, then I would start to back off. But my colleagues at Hamlin have been really, really supportive, and I have been back teaching now for 5 years, and it also, I think a lot of people will say, well, like, why do you still work? If you don't know that you have much time left. And I think it's way better for me to be working and feeling like I'm contributing in my life versus stopping working and staying at home and thinking about dying. So this choice for me has been a good way to go.
The conversation is about living well, and it's interesting you keep talking about, dying instead of choosing kind of not to die. How do you deal with that mentally, emotionally, the stage 4, that sounds really scary, and trying to live well and not focus on the dying part?
Yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't work every day. And so it's a daily challenge. For me, my faith is a really important component of my life. I start every day with about 10 minutes of prayer and thanking God for this day, and not sure how many I have left, but today is a good day. I'm still here, and so that's been an important part for me. Also, I've in the documentary, you see I've started yoga, and initially...
And we should interject, you're not just kind of starting yoga, you look like you're a guru of yoga. You're crazy good at it.
But people recommended I start yoga after I got sick, and I had a broken back, and it actually really made me mad when people would tell me I should start yoga, because I felt like they were saying, oh, just practice yoga, and stage 4 cancer will be, it will go away, or you'll be all better, and I just knew that would be the case. But I started practicing yoga, and it is not just a physical discipline, but it's also a spiritual discipline, and the way that you try to calm your mind has been actually a key aspect for me of how to live daily with the anxiety and threat of not getting to live for very much longer. So yoga has actually become kind of an obsession, and I do it quite often. And when I can't do it because I've had surgery or because of whatever, I really feel the difference, and I do have a much harder time dealing with the anxiety if I can't be doing yoga. So yoga has become a very central practice to helping me kind of live well with what I have.
Interesting. Thank you, Deanna. Let's move on to Maureen. We haven't heard your story yet. Maureen, can you tell us about your journey and who's been there to help you?
Hi, I'm Maureen Adelman. My journey started on May 30th, 2006. I went into Regents Hospital for an x-ray, which turned into a mammogram of a fat nodule, and next thing I knew, they were doing a biopsy. I wound up being diagnosed with stage 4 cancer within 2 weeks of that. At that particular time, it had spread to my lungs and to my liver and my spine. And the one good thing, this sounds really weird, but there are some great things about having cancer. You stop worrying about all the little things in life and you decide to live. And I just said to myself, I am going to make it through this. I'm going to have the surgery, do the chemo, and chemo, of course, was a little rough. It is for everyone. I was very lucky in that I went through chemo and radiation, and then decided, okay, I am going to really concentrate on doing all the things I want to do in my life and really get involved in all kinds of things. I had just retired from a 30-year career at Danes as a top retail executive, so I was reinventing myself, and so it has worked out really, really well. I'm very grateful to my husband and daughter, my family. and to a wonderful group of friends, and definitely to Dr. Anderson at Regents Hospital, who's really been a great, great supporter and extremely bright and creative in finding new approaches to deal with the cancer.
So how about this topic, Maureen, of living well? How do you think you are living well?
Well, every day I get up, and first of all, early on I went to Look Good, Feel Better, which is where, you know, you have those ugly chemo hats and you don't have any hair, and so professional makeup artist puts on makeup on everyone, and I realized, hey, I'm going to get up every morning and not look like I am sick, and just move on with life. So that's what I've been doing. Every day I try to make sure I have something scheduled to do, and it's worked real well.
And how about your support system? You mentioned your family before. Tell us more about that. Yeah.
I could not be luckier. My daughter's a physician assistant at Regents, so she certainly clearly understands cancer. My husband's been just wonderful on this whole journey. And then what was really interesting, I was diagnosed May 30th, 2006, and then I joined the St. Paul Garden Club in July of 2006, and I had never been in a women's organization, so I never really, from working in a male-dominated business world, I never realized the importance of having women's friends. So I developed over the years a wonderful network of women's friends who have been very, very supportive too. And then we have two dogs. We have a lab and a golden retriever, and they certainly help if I'm feeling down.
I love that. I actually have a therapy dog myself. You want to tell us some more about the dogs and how they help?
First of all, so the Regents Hospital thing, it's a whole family connection now. So I'm the patient, Tanya, my daughter, is the physician assistant, Jackson, the golden retriever, is the therapy dog at Regents, and Ira, my husband, is the therapy dog handler. So it's kind of cool. And Jackson was... Ira's done this in the last couple of years, and it's been absolutely wonderful to have a therapy dog. And both golden retrievers and black labs are very, very friendly social animals. So it's good to have animals around. And
right. And let's explain for anybody who doesn't know, because a therapy dog is different than a service dog. Tell us what therapy the dogs do.
The therapy dog, Ira takes the dog around Regents hospitals to different areas, like the cancer center, and then the dog interacts with the patients. And I think the coolest part of what Jackson does is he goes to the mental health wing of Regents Hospital, and the patients there just greatly appreciate the warmth and friendliness of the dog. And so they usually spend a couple hours there, and now he's at the university too. So he does the PAUSE program at the university, where students who had dogs or cats or animals in their life can come in for a half hour and get some interaction with an animal, and it's a really good thing.
Neat. Love it. All right, let's bring in Dawn, our filmmaker here. I wonder, so you're not a patient or a doctor on this call, but what did you learn as a filmmaker in this?
Well, that's a big question. There's a lot of things to learn in this series. One thing is the resiliency of people. I've been so inspired by everybody we've talked to, their stories. You know, the insight about cancer being treated as a chronic illness was new to me, and you know, seeing people really live full lives. I mean, in Cancer in Between, we look at a story of a woman named Alice who had this corporate job and, you know, traveled around the country doing sales, and after her diagnosis and going on disability and realizing the impact of her diagnosis, she decided to go back to school. She just got her bachelor's in social work and has just been accepted to the U's Masters of Social Work program. She has stage 4 cancer, and she's rocking it. And I think this has been really exciting to see these stories and see people just embracing life in whatever way they want to, whether it be living your life, continuing on the path you were on, or taking a completely different route, which was the case for Alice.
I wonder what images stick with you, because I think that the beauty of working in television and our medium is the visuals that we have. And I think of when I was watching some of the pieces, yoga, we were talking about one of our people on our call doing unbelievable yoga, and some of those visuals of how vibrant these patients and these survivors are. Can you talk about some of the images that stuck with you?
Well, right away I think of somebody else who's in Cancer in Between, Tom, who was advised by a therapist to draw. If he's up late at night, just do some drawing. And, just to channel your feelings. You don't have to create a masterpiece. In fact, don't pay attention to what it looks like. Just draw. And since that time, he's been doing drawings every night. And they're phenomenal. I can't possibly draw like this man draws. And he started because of this. He didn't realize he was an artist. And you'll see some of his work in Cancer in Between, these gorgeous pieces that really convey what he's going through emotionally. He's actually creating, he wants to do a drawing every day, 365 days of drawings, and then, show that emotional journey of what he's experienced on those days. So I think that for me is a very strong visual of, what people are doing, and it's an emotional visual. He's, with his colors, the eyes of these faces that he's drawing, they're phenomenal.
And how about kind of the community dialogue? 'Cause ever since about a week ago when we first taped the Survivor Awards, and then I was driving and hearing public radio talking about cancer, it already seems amazing ahead of this Ken Burns production airing on public television next week, the dialogue that's going, and that it's open and it's a different conversation. Do you feel this in the community as well?
Absolutely. It's hard for me to assess how much of this is because I'm paying attention more versus how much is an increased community dialogue. But yeah, I mean, people coming out of the woodwork sharing their stories. I've learned in the last few months a number of people in my own life who have cancer who are talking about it now. And, so I think that there's definitely more dialogue, but yeah, again, I'm sensitive to the fact that I'm also paying attention more.
But I think, what you realize, I think, once you start talking is that everybody's touched by it. I know in closing the show I talked about the fact that, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer last year, and she was stage 1, super early. It's doing amazing. And when you share your story, you find out everybody has a connection. Did you find that?
Yes, absolutely. And when I'd tell people what I'm working on, you go to a party or something, hey, what are you working on? And I'd tell people, and they were like, oh, I've gone through that, or my sister's gone through that, or, it's much more common than you would think. And yeah, that is definitely another aha for me, was one of the, I'm drawing a blank on who said it, but early on in the documentary, one of the, I think it was a physiatrist, says, there are so many people walking around with cancer that you would never know had cancer, and that's kind of the point. They're living their lives.
Great, thank you, Donna. Let's bring in some of the medical professionals. Dr. Goldman, Sandra, we're going to talk to you. Dr. Goldman, talk about this concept of living with cancer, living well with cancer, and how we're changing our mindset around the diagnosis.
It's really interesting, right? What I notice mostly when we talk about there's a big difference sometimes when I see somebody who is older, has more of an experience with other, ideas. Like 20 years ago, people were saying, okay, you have cancer, you're going to have chemo, rest, conserve your energy. Now what we're finding is exercise, even during treatment, actually seems to have a pretty good benefit, both in terms of mood, but also in terms of ability to tolerate therapies, to avoid some of the negative effects that come from these things. And I think that that's quite powerful on many levels. Part of why I love working with cancer population and functional issues with that population is, look, you go through this process. You have a diagnosis. You don't have a lot of control over the diagnosis. You don't necessarily have a lot of control over how they're going to treat you. You can decide if you're going to be treated or not, but you don't necessarily know what's going to happen as you go through these things. There's all these uncertainties. And the thing that you can do, and that I find very, really profoundly life-affirming, is people can decide how they want to take care of themselves. They can decide what relationships are focal, what activities are meaningful, and they can maximize those things. And for someone like me, I get this crazy opportunity to see this every day. I get to see somebody go through a process where they have to confront their mortality and decide what's going to come out of that. And when we talk about living with cancer, I mean, look, statistically, I may not get this number entirely right, but I think the last I read, we had over 12 million Americans living with cancer. We expect that that number is going to go up over the next 10 years. We expect it to be in the next 10 years more like 18 million. And so what we're finding is, yes, cancer is not just a death sentence. You have the capacity to live for quite a while. And there are a lot of people who have things like bone metastasis and are on, sort of a maintenance chemotherapy program. Well, that wasn't something people used to think about as much 10 years ago, but they think about it now. And so then the question is exactly like what we've been hearing from both Deanna and I am just blanked on
Maureen.
Maureen. I'm sorry, Maureen. I'm horrible with names. But when I see these people who have a life, and so you have a diagnosis, but the diagnosis isn't what you are. The diagnosis is your life. The diagnosis is a piece of something you have to deal with in the course of your everyday life, and you have to decide how you approach your life.
I wonder in the broader consciousness that this concept comes through in the Ken Burns production and some of the local productions too, this idea of cancer, not a death sentence like you said, but cancer as a chronic illness. Has this sunk into your average patient yet?
It depends on the patient. It really does. I have people who come in and don't know what to expect. And I see people at all different stages too. Sometimes I see somebody who's really physically already in pretty bad shape and really needs a lot of help with therapies and a lot of help with figuring out how to manage fatigue and so on. Some of the stuff that also I'm sure Sandra does in helping with symptom management with palliative care. But then sometimes I see someone who's just been diagnosed. And so then it's a question of, those people are at a very different place emotionally and mentally. And so, a lot of what I have the privilege of getting to do is give these people a little bit of room to express what they're thinking of and answer questions. And so if it's someone who's earlier on in the diagnosis, a lot of times they are more afraid. You don't have anything to base, these people do not have anything to base their experience on. They don't, it's not like, oh, the last time I had cancer, it's not old hat. It's usually something new. And whereas sometimes someone who's been through a process longer, they may have other issues that they're thinking about or concerned about in terms of how they're dealing with the disease burden. And those people may have more of a sense of, sometimes they're more depressed and less likely to want to do things because they've had a hard time and they're tired. But sometimes they're in an entirely different place in terms of having figured out a way to work through a process. Did that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm in circles, so you have to stop me if I...
Yeah, no, it was good work. Before we run out of time with you, too, I want you to explain briefly what you do, too, what your specialty is, because it's really interesting.
So physiatry, right? I get a lot of patients who come in and they say, well, why am I here? And the best way for me to explain what I do is, well, physiatrists, whatever you want to call it, we're movement specialists. We're mobility specialists. What my training is in is things having to do with peripheral nervous system issues, musculoskeletal problems, So additionally, you know, I did some extra training working exclusively with cancer patients. That means that I have a different perspective in terms of how you're in terms of assessing things that may be problematic for you after a surgery, in your ability to do stuff of your everyday life, an ability to get dressed, an ability to put your clothes on, like Deanna was talking about, you know. And then what we do is assess those problems. We figure out what are the things that are most focal, and then we work with therapists to maximize the outcome and troubleshoot when something isn't working with therapy. So what I do is more, it's more collaborative than what most physicians get to do, because you have to, as the patient, take some action, and I have to help figure out with you what's going to work. And that's not going to be the same for every person. There's not a set protocol or series of priorities that every one person has.
Good. Okay, thank you, doctor. Let's collaborate with Sandra. Tell us about palliative care, and why don't you start out by describing what you do?
Sure. So thank you for asking. I'm a palliative care practitioner, so seeing patients oftentimes not at their best, where they're in crisis. Typically they've been hospitalized, where they're reaching out to us because medically something is happening with them. But really from a palliative care focus, people might be really thinking I'm going to cure this, or people might be on the far end of the spectrum of I may not live long with this and I need to make the most of every day. So palliative care is really being with individuals and their families to support them to live well with whatever time they have left for however long. And I love all the conversations that have been happening, and I think about what needs to be different for patients, families, their social network, nurses, doctors, the healthcare system. We need to think differently about people who are living with serious illness, and that we have to be more intentional about thinking, what are the deliberate conversations I should be having with my patients? People having deliberate conversations with their family members, and the conversations don't always, should not always focus on the medical care, because we often jump into a rescue mode, or let's try to fix this, and fixing is not always what we can do. And so I think the approach really should be about, it's not what's the matter with me, but what matters most to me, what matters to me today, what's important as I try to live well with my medical condition. And if everybody starts there, it really turns into something very different, that we move from more of a cookie cutter approach to caring for people with cancer based upon protocols to really individualizing a plan for individuals as they're trying to live well with their serious medical condition, because the medical issues might be fairly similar, but most people have lots of non-medical issues that we need to think about, support, and tend to, that we don't often see, because we only see people about 10% of the time when they reach out, when they need to have something medically tended to. Otherwise, 90% of the time people are out in the community really trying to live well, trying to figure out how do I create the networks to be able to survive on a daily basis.
I wonder how much your work has changed. You talk about things we need to do more going forward. How much has this changed in the last 5, 10, 20 years, say?
Well, I think there's been a movement for probably since the 1980s around hospice, providing really good support for people when they've decided to be comfort care. But that's somewhat self-limiting for us today. We need to think beyond just end-of-life care and comfort when you decide you no longer want to treat your illness. People are living longer with serious medical conditions that they're going to have complications that may or may not turn out how we like. And so really moving advanced care planning conversations upstream, trying to figure out how do you provide a hospice or palliative care whole person approach to patients and families outside of the traditional model of the healthcare system and the payers. We need to move that upstream to figure out how do you do that, how do you support patients and families look at their non-medical needs and try to get outside the box of the bricks and mortar of our health systems, our clinics, to really meet people where they're at, where they're living.
And before we run out of time, are we there? Because it seems like when you hear the word cancer, it's all medical decision. It is all bricks and mortar. You're talking about something completely different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in the traditional sense, I'm not wanting to discount the need for really making informed decisions about treatments, because they can have an impact for people on how well they feel financially, if it's a burden on your family, your ability to work, do those normal things. But those are really important and smart decisions that people need to make. But those are just medical. People, as they try to live well outside of their medical illness, have lots of decisions they need to make about who supports me, how do I pay for my medications, how do I be able to work and continue with my job, how do I do all those things in a time when if you just reach out to the medical system, they only attempt to try to fix your medical condition. There has to be more of a partnership, I think, between patients, families, and the health system.
Well, thank you. And we want to thank everybody. We want to say thanks for participating in this and tuning in and following along. You can learn more about the people and topics we discussed watching Living Cancer, Living Beyond Cancer, a celebration produced in partnership with Health Partners. That's 10 p.m. again, Monday, March 30th. And the Late in Life Cancer In Between program, 10 p.m. Tuesday, March 31st at 8 p.m. You can catch the 3-part series, Cancer, the Emperor of All Maladies, presented by Ken Burns. Also, if you have a story about cancer, you want to hear about it, you can share it on the website. They have a story wall at cancerfilms.org. Thanks so much, and tune in for the next Google Chat Back next Monday at 10 a.m. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.